A warning to our viewers. What you're about to watch is a true story. The following program contains content that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Natchitoches, Louisiana, July 17, 2018, 10:57 p.m. Jesus Christ! That's not garbage burning. That's a baby! The firefighter's scream cuts through the night as his flashlight illuminates what no human should ever see. A 6-month-old infant, writhing in flames, skin blackening, fat melting, organs cooking from the inside out. Baby Levi Cole Ellerbe, kidnapped, doused in gasoline, set on fire, and left to burn alive in a roadside ditch. 2 hours earlier, his mother Hanna Barker called 911, hysterical. "Someone took my baby. 2 men broke in and sprayed something in my face. It was all a lie." The truth? Police would discover Hanna had allegedly asked her girlfriend a chilling question at the local IHOP that very afternoon. "Do you love me enough to do anything for me, even if it means going to jail?" The answer was yes. What followed was a murder so calculated, so cold-blooded that it shocked even veteran detectives. No evident psychosis, no drug-fueled rage, just a mother who allegedly found her child inconvenient, and a lover willing to burn that child alive to prove her devotion. As the investigation unfolded, detectives faced a maze of contradictions. Hanna's shifting stories, the suspiciously staged crime scene, the total lack of physical evidence tying her to her son's murder, and, at the center of it all, 2 women pointing fingers at each other, while a community demanded justice for a baby who died in unspeakable agony. This isn't just a story about how Levi died. It's about the lies, manipulation, and betrayal that made his murder possible, and the relentless pursuit of truth that would ultimately bring his killers to justice. Welcome to the Shadow Files crime series. Tonight's case will shake you to your core. Take a moment to hit subscribe, drop a like, and please let us know where you're watching from. And now, we begin. Natchitoches, Louisiana, the oldest permanent settlement in the entire Louisiana Purchase, founded in 1714 along the winding Cane River, a town of just under 18,000 souls, where historical brick buildings line the downtown district and Spanish moss drapes from centuries-old oak trees. Tourism brochures paint it as a charming slice of Southern history, but away from the preserved facades and heritage sites lies a different reality. In the trailer parks and modest homes scattered across Natchitoches Parish, many young families struggle with generational poverty, limited job prospects, and the crushing weight of America's opioid epidemic. Here, the median household income hovers around $28,000, nearly half the national average. Dreams die young in these parts, often replaced by addiction and desperation. It was in this environment that 22-year-old Hanna Barker was raising her infant son Levi. A high school dropout with a history of drug problems, Barker had met Levi's father, Billy Ellerbe Jr., while both were in drug court, a last-chance program for addicts facing criminal charges. Their relationship had grown strained, leaving Hanna to care for Levi primarily on her own in a small travel trailer. Enter Felicia Nicole Smith, 26, a cook at the local IHOP restaurant and Barker's girlfriend. By all outward appearances, Smith seemed devoted to both Hanna and baby Levi. What no one realized was that beneath the surface of this seemingly normal young family, a sinister plot was already in motion. One that would end with the unthinkable sacrifice of an innocent child. Levi Cole Ellerbe entered the world in the winter of 2017, a perfect baby boy with bright eyes and a full head of dark hair. In interviews before his death, Hanna described herself as anxious, nervous, excited about his birth. She posted beaming photos on social media, cradling her newborn son, images that would later haunt investigators as they tried to reconcile the doting mother in those pictures with the woman they would eventually charge with orchestrating his murder. For the first 6 months of his life, Levi seemed to be developing normally. Neighbors would later recall hearing a baby's laughter from inside the cramped travel trailer Hanna called home, a stark metal rectangle parked on a modest plot of land in Natchitoches. The trailer had just enough room for a small kitchenette, a bathroom, and a bedroom where mother and son slept. In summer, the Louisiana heat would transform the thin-walled structure into an oven. In winter, the cold would seep through every crack. The relationship between Hanna and Levi's father, Billy Ellerbe Jr., had grown increasingly strained after Levi's birth. The two had met while both were participating in Natchitoches Parish Drug Court, a program offering an alternative to incarceration for those struggling with addiction. Their shared history of substance abuse had initially brought them together, but parenthood had pushed them apart. Court records paint a troubling picture of Hanna's life before motherhood. In 2016, she had pleaded guilty to multiple drug charges, resulting in 5 years of probation instead of jail time. Her probation officer would later testify about numerous violations during her time in drug court: missed check-ins, failed drug tests, and unauthorized relationships with known drug dealers. For Hanna, the daily reality of raising Levi alone was a struggle that few in her life fully understood. Finding reliable childcare while working minimum-wage jobs was nearly impossible. The cost of formula, diapers, and baby clothes stretched her meager income to the breaking point. Sleepless nights with a colicky infant compounded the stress. The freedom of her pre-motherhood life must have seemed a distant memory. It was during this vulnerable period that Felicia Smith entered the picture. 10 years Hanna's senior, Smith held a steady job as a cook at the local IHOP. She had her own place, her own income, and she showed immediate interest in both Hanna and baby Levi. For a struggling young mother, Smith must have seemed like a godsend, a stable partner who could provide both emotional and financial support. Their relationship progressed quickly, developing into what investigators would later describe as an intimate sexual relationship. But beneath the surface, troubling dynamics were at play. According to statements Smith later made to investigators, she had fallen deeply in love with Hanna, becoming infatuated with the younger woman. Hanna, however, allegedly viewed the relationship quite differently. In a chilling confession, Smith would later tell authorities that Hanna was simply using her for attention and money, playing on Smith's emotions to extract financial support and affection without genuinely reciprocating her feelings. This emotional manipulation would eventually take a sinister turn. Smith told investigators that she had become obsessively devoted to Hanna, willing to do anything to maintain their relationship. Smith was much more invested in the relationship than she was, one detective noted in his report, referencing Hanna's statements during questioning. This imbalance created a dangerous power dynamic, one that Hanna allegedly exploited to deadly effect. As we go into the most chilling details of this documentary, take a brief moment to like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, for more in-depth investigations and analysis of significant cases like this. As the spring of 2018 turned to summer, what had begun as a seemingly hopeful new chapter for Hanna, with a supportive partner to help raise her child, was transforming into something far more disturbing. Behind closed doors, a deadly proposal was allegedly taking shape, one that would irreversibly alter the fates of everyone involved, especially innocent baby Levi. July 17, 2018, began as an ordinary summer day in Natchitoches. Security footage from the local IHOP captured Hanna Barker entering the restaurant at approximately 1:30 p.m. She was there to meet Felicia Smith, who was working her regular shift. What transpired during this meeting would later become a crucial piece of evidence for prosecutors. According to Smith's subsequent testimony, this wasn't a casual lunch date. It was here, amid the clatter of plates and syrup dispensers, that Barker allegedly asked the fateful question, "Do you love me enough to do anything for me, even if it means going to jail?" Smith would later tell investigators that Barker then outlined her deadly request. She wanted her son killed. When Smith initially balked, Barker allegedly persuaded her, playing on her devotion and manipulating her feelings until Smith reluctantly agreed. Fast forward to 9:10 p.m. that evening. Residents near Barker's trailer hear frantic screaming. Seconds later, 2 911 calls are placed. The first from Barker's landlord, the second from Barker herself. Both received within 30 seconds of each other. "My baby's gone. Someone took my baby." Barker's voice wails through the phone line. She tells the dispatcher that 2 men knocked on her door, sprayed her in the face with mace or pepper spray, and when she ran outside to escape, they entered her home and took Levi. When questioned later, she would give 3 different descriptions of these alleged kidnappers. For the next hour and a half, police begin searching the area around Barker's trailer. Meanwhile, approximately 1.5 miles away, Felicia Smith allegedly carries out the plan. Court documents reveal she took Levi to a desolate area along Breda Avenue near railroad tracks, doused his tiny body in gasoline, and set him on fire before leaving for her shift at IHOP. At approximately 10:49 p.m., a passing motorist notices flames in a roadside ditch and calls 911, reporting what they assume is just another trash fire, a common occurrence in rural areas. Natchitoches firefighters arrive on scene at 10:57 p.m. What they discover turns the evening from a routine call into an unforgettable nightmare. There in the ditch lies baby Levi, his body catastrophically burned but somehow still alive. 2nd and 3rd degree burns cover 90% of his small frame. His clothing has melted into his skin. Emergency responders rush Levi to Natchitoches Regional Medical Center in critical condition. Doctors, recognizing the severity of his injuries, arrange an immediate airlift to University Health in Shreveport, where a specialized burn unit awaits. Despite the medical team's desperate efforts, the damage is too extensive. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on July 18, 2018, Levi Cole Ellerbe is pronounced dead, his brief life extinguished, in one of the most painful ways imaginable. As dawn broke over Natchitoches on July 18th, investigators were already growing suspicious of Hanna Barker's kidnapping story. Lieutenant Jeremy Swisher of the Louisiana State Fire Marshal's Office, who would later become the key witness against Barker, noticed troubling inconsistencies from the start. She alternated between being mad and screaming, Swisher would later testify in court, but I never saw her cry. For seasoned investigators, her emotional responses seemed performative rather than genuine, the behavior of someone playing the role of grieving mother rather than actually experiencing that grief. The physical evidence, or lack thereof, further eroded her credibility. Despite Barker's claims of being pepper sprayed, officers detected no lingering chemical smell in the trailer. Her face showed none of the telltale redness, swelling, or irritation that pepper spray invariably leaves behind. When questioned about this discrepancy, Barker had no explanation. The broken window at the rear of the trailer raised additional red flags. The glass was shattered, but the security bar remained in place, making it impossible for anyone to have entered that way. Forensic analysis later revealed something damning. Felicia Smith's fingerprints and blood were found on the broken glass. The scene had all the hallmarks of being staged. Perhaps most damning was a simple, logical inconsistency in Barker's initial statement. She told both her landlord and the 911 dispatcher that her baby had been taken. Yet by her own account, she had fled her trailer immediately after being pepper sprayed, running straight to her landlord's home. How could she have known Levi was missing if she never went back inside to check? When confronted with these inconsistencies, Barker's story shifted, not once, but 3 times. She gave different descriptions of her alleged attackers and changed key details with each retelling. As one investigator put it, she changed her statement based on the facts we gave her to look more credible. At the burn site, investigators recovered traces of gasoline and a partial shoe print. They also found an empty child's diaper. But there was nothing directly connecting Hanna Barker to the scene, a fact her defense would later emphasize. The breakthrough came just days after Levi's death when investigators identified Felicia Smith as a person of interest. What led them to her doorstep would change the entire trajectory of the case. On July 21st, just 4 days after Levi's death, police arrested Felicia Marie Nicole Smith at her apartment. Initially charged with first-degree murder, Smith remained silent during her first encounter with authorities, but as the evidence mounted against her, she made a decision that would send shockwaves through the community. She began to talk. In a recorded confession that left even veteran investigators shaken, Smith admitted to committing the unthinkable act. She described in clinical detail how she had taken baby Levi from Barker's trailer, carried him to a secluded area near railroad tracks on Breda Avenue, doused his body with gasoline, and set him on fire. She then calmly left the scene to report for her shift at IHOP, as if she hadn't just committed one of the most horrific crimes in Natchitoches history. But the most explosive part of Smith's confession wasn't the admission of her own guilt. It was her accusation that Hanna Barker had masterminded the entire plot. According to Smith, killing Levi wasn't her idea at all. It was a plan conceived by the child's own mother. Smith told investigators that their initial plan had been to shoot the infant. She claimed to have a gun for this purpose, but said it had jammed. When police later searched Smith's home, they indeed found a firearm rendered inoperable because someone had loaded a bullet backward into the chamber, precisely as Smith had described. With the gun option eliminated, Smith said Barker suggested an alternative method: burning. According to Smith's testimony, Barker specifically requested that Levi be burned until he was bones, to eliminate any evidence that might connect the crime back to her. When asked about Barker's motive, Smith pointed to the young mother's frequent complaints about the burden of parenthood. She talked about how hard it was to find babysitters, Smith stated, how she couldn't keep a job because of Levi. Text messages recovered from Smith's phone showed Barker lamenting the difficulties of single motherhood on multiple occasions. In perhaps the most disturbing revelation, Smith described how Barker had emotionally manipulated her into committing the murder. She claimed Barker had asked her, "Do you love me enough to do anything for me, even if it means going to jail?" Exploiting Smith's deep emotional attachment to convince her to commit an unspeakable act. On July 25, 2018, Hanna Barker was arrested and charged as a principal to first-degree murder. When detectives informed her that Smith had implicated her in the crime, Barker's response was immediate and visceral. "That bee killed my baby," she spat out, her face contorted with what appeared to be genuine rage. In court, two starkly different narratives emerged. Barker's defense attorney, D.U. Thompson, framed Smith as a jilted lover seeking revenge. "The only evidence the state has against Barker is Smith's statement," Thompson argued during a preliminary hearing. "There's nothing else. No texts, no phone calls, no witnesses that can back up Smith's claim." Thompson painted Smith as the sole perpetrator, pointing out that she not only had a motive, the end of their relationship, but had actually confessed to the crime. Accusing Barker was only done to save herself, Thompson insisted, and get a better deal in this case. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Cliff Strider, acknowledged their case against Barker was largely circumstantial, but argued it was nonetheless compelling. They had security footage confirming Barker and Smith's meeting at IHOP on the day of the murder, exactly when Smith claimed they had discussed killing Levi. Strider emphasized Barker's inconsistent statements, her lack of emotional response consistent with genuine grief, and what investigators called a clearly staged crime scene at her trailer. "She changed her statement based on the facts we gave her to look more credible," Strider told the court. "That's an indication of guilt." The two women's legal paths diverged dramatically. While Smith ultimately pleaded guilty to the horrific crime, admitting her role in Levi's death, Barker maintained her complete innocence. She sat in the courtroom shaking her head in denial as the evidence was presented, occasionally mouthing "I love y'all" to family members seated behind her. Throughout the proceedings, Barker remained steadfast. She had no part in her son's death. Nearly 4 years after Levi's murder, justice finally arrived, though many would question whether it was truly sufficient. On July 21, 2021, Felicia Smith pleaded guilty to manslaughter, conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, and cruelty to a juvenile. She received the maximum sentence for each charge: 40 years for manslaughter, 30 years for conspiracy, and 10 years for cruelty, to be served consecutively, totaling 80 years of hard labor without the possibility of probation or parole. 9 months later, on May 4, 2022, Hanna Barker also took a plea deal. But with a crucial difference. Barker entered what's known as an Alford plea, allowing her to maintain her innocence while acknowledging prosecutors had enough evidence for a conviction. She received 30 years for conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and 10 years for manslaughter, to be served concurrently. During the sentencing, Kathy Ellerbe, Levi's paternal grandmother, delivered a heart-wrenching impact statement. "The loss of my grandson and knowing how he was murdered has been devastating. For the past 3 years, our hearts have been broken, and there will always be a void in our lives because of this evil." Special Prosecutor Clifford Strider, who had spent over 40 years prosecuting violent crimes, described the case in stark terms. "In my experience prosecuting cases throughout Louisiana, this case ranks as one of the most heinous and callous acts of cruelty I have ever seen." Billy Ellerbe, Levi's father, could only thank the first responders for their compassion in handling his son's case, too overcome with emotion to say more. Even with both perpetrators behind bars, troubling questions linger. An independent defense attorney revealed that with good behavior and participation in prison programs, Barker could be released in as little as 6 years, a sentence that seems inconceivable given the magnitude of the crime. What drives a mother to allegedly orchestrate the murder of her own child? Was it the burden of responsibility? Mental illness? Pure callousness? We may never truly know. Levi's case has changed how investigators approach infanticide, particularly in recognizing the complex dynamics of manipulative relationships as potential catalysts for violence against children. The tragedy of baby Levi reminds us of the terrible vulnerability of children and the darkness that can lurk behind ordinary facades. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the greatest danger to a child comes from the very person nature designed to protect them. If you suspect child abuse, please call the National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4-A-CHILD. One call could save a life. If you enjoyed this content, join our community by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscriber makes it possible for us to keep creating content we're passionate about sharing with you.